Hello everybody and welcome to another painting video. This is something brand new. It's so new in fact it's not actually available yet. And this is one of the Savage Giants from song Ice and Fire. It's part of the Free Folk army. I've actually got a couple of these guys that I've prepped up here. So here's his buddy. So we'll do this one in another painting video. We might do him in oils, we'll see. But we've got their bases all set and their movement trays here. We'll be working on this too. We're going to do some snow effects on this. We'll see what kind of snow we might put on him. You look in the reference picture at this guy that's over here in the upper right hand corner. You can see there's a lot of purples and grays in that skin tone. I'm going to try and put that in there too. And they basically just walk around with sticks and bones, whatever stuff they pick up, and they whack people with it. So that's pretty much what we've got going on here with this guy. We've got the usual suspects here. We're going to have a lot of the Reaper liner paints, blue, brown, red, sepia. Might even throw the green liner in there too. We've got a few secret weapon colors out here. We might throw some more on too. The engine rust, yeah, it's a weathering paint, but I like to use it for skin colors. Oh look, we have another rust color that you might also use for some skin and other shading. And this caked dirt, something that I also use to make my own homemade mud. We'll be using this too on the fur and some of the other items. Might also be using it on the base to do some spattered mud. We'll see. And we've got some other Reaper miniature colors. We always have these out. These are my off-white colors. This one a little more blue. This one a little bit more red. And we may add other ones. We'll see what happens. But the Free Folk definitely are really nifty looking miniatures here. We've got a couple of others that are prepped. And we'll be doing these in videos. Some will be for the patrons, and some will be more of a general release. This first one's more of a general release, and the other giants, like the ones in oils and such, those will be for the patrons. Just James Wappel on Patreon. Easy to find. I've got tons of Song of Ice and Fire stuff already. At least 12 hours worth of videos on Lannisters, if you like them. Here's some of the stuff we're going to use. These are my favorite, of course. The number 8 round craft brushes. And you notice one here. That's a bit newer. And you see it has a nice, pristine, sharp point. This one's been worn down, used a little bit. Well, it becomes a really fantastic, custom-made filbert brush. So you see we got the advantage of a wider but softer touch. And look at that. Has the same exact point, although this time it's more of a chisel point. We're also going to work with some of our makeup sponges, probably towards the beginning when we do our initial washes on this guy, and we're wiping those away. And for those of you that may be not so familiar with the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures, you can see they've really been adding a lot of stuff. That the Boltons are in, and now you've got your Night's Watch 2, plenty of neutral heroes, plenty of characters for all the different. Yeah, got a whole full line of Bolton stuff, and all of that is going to be, we've got Starks, all that stuff is ready to be painted here in our little video world. So I think that's enough of an intro. I just want to talk about the brushes real quick. So these are the brushes in question. You can see not real expensive. There's 12 of these. Get them from Hobby Lobby. You don't have to get them in the store. You can get them from their website. It's, again, just a nice cheap brush that really takes a beating. I've used these for basing materials. Got glue in them. Little rubbing alcohol cleans them out, and I'm painting with them sometimes the same day. So we're going to get some colors out on the palette, and we'll do some of that initial glazing on him. Just kind of figured out where we want some of our shadow patterns to be. we've got the colors out on the palette, so it's time to do a little bit of that shaded base coat, initial glazes that we were talking about. So we've got some green liner here, red liner, brown liner, sepia liner, and we actually throw a little bit of the Secret Weapon Old Rust out there too. We're going to actually also add a couple of the Secret Weapon Verdigris colors out there. I forgot about those in the introduction. And what we want to do is figure out not just what color are these going to be, but how dark is this stuff going to be? Because you see how different is this hair from the skin color. Pictures over here on the left show something really different than the one on the right. So maybe we'll play between the two of them. So we're going to start this off. I'm going to take the green liner here, the red liner. Going to mix these two together. Green and red make brown. Now you're saying, you got brown liner sitting right over here. But that's a really different brown. That's almost a warmer, more yellowish brown. When you make your own color like this, you're going to get more values out of it. Because if you cut this down, say with something like that maiden flesh, it might look a little more green, a little more red, depending on how much green or red you mixed in there. Let's see, we're going to do something with the hair right here. I'm going to throw some of that down. We're going to get some water in there. And we'll just let this flow in watercolor style. I'm going to use gravity as much as we can. I'll let this roll down here. Gonna water it down even a little more along the way, and you're gonna notice this is almost looks more like a grayish purple than a brown. That's because of the red we got in there. So let's actually, speaking of red, take a little bit of that red rust. Here's another little bit of a glaze we're gonna start to do. This is what I like to do, is switch up the glaze colors. And what I'm doing too is playing off of that primer painting that I did with the Badger Stynylrez. Talked about that on the blog. And the idea is to, instead of just priming it white or black or gray or some dead color, you're actually putting a little bit of color in. This had a little bit of greenish to it. So as I've got my sponges here, what we're going to do is remove some of that. Not all of it, just some of it. See how we're getting even a little more shadow down there. We leave what we did on the hair for the most part, but we take some off of the face. We're going to keep going here. Again, working with gravity as much as we can. Right down to the hand. And these are some sponges that I've cut into smaller shapes. Probably see that later. Lets me get into some of these areas a little bit easier. Again, working our way using gravity. And change this up again. So this is where we're going to take some of that sepia liner and we'll extend that out from where the hand is. There's going to be a few times where this may not be an ideal angle for you to see. It's just, I have to be able to see it myself. I have to be able to get the brush in there. And while these aren't gigantic figures, they're still sort of pushing the limit of the space that I have to work with here. And that's why one of the things we're trying to do with the Patreon page is get the funds to make another larger camera setup. Not just for bigger miniatures, but also for stuff like terrain. Because anybody that knows me knows I love me some terrain. So we're back to that sepia liner here. And I'm going to actually go over here. Let's see if we can up the brightness of this a little bit. I think you'll be able to see that. I'll have to turn it down again once I start adding some lights. Here's some brown liner. And you can see we try and just switch this around every so often. I'm even going to grab some green liner over here. It's going to be hardly noticeable, probably on camera, what we're doing here. But it really does help you to get a little more randomness to your color instead of just, well, we're going to paint this part of the cloth this color green, and we're going to only use these colors of green to shade it. That's where stuff starts to get boring, especially larger stuff like this with a larger surface area. So I needed to get into this part here. It was just too hard to reach with the other sponges. That's what these are for. I think these are some kind of lip sponges, whatever. Yeah, that's me. All things Maybelline, of course. Here, let's work over here now. Not forgetting the sepia liner there. And you notice that I didn't work all the way down here. I tried to find areas where it would just naturally, the flow of the liquid would just sort of naturally stop. It's another little bit of a watercolor type trick there. Because, hey, that's what I used to do many moons ago. I was a watercolorist, oil painter, pastel painter, all that fun stuff. Let's get some more shadows down in here. And these are just going to be really, really dark. Not even going to get any liquid in this as we get down in here. Not even sure you can see that. I'm just smashing the brush in there. You can see this is a pretty aggressive brush action that I'm doing. It's not hurting this brush at all. That's what I love about these. You can really beat the snot out of these things and not have to worry. Well, even if you were to get super glue on them, and, well, you can get rid of the super glue anyway, but if it wasn't necessarily a pristine tip anymore or whatever, well, it cost you 35 cents or somewhere along those lines, depending on, I guess, how much sales tax is where you live. So again, this is a little bit on the larger side for this camera setup, but I thought I'd try and do it anyway. So here we'll get rid of some of that. This also, as you can see, can go in and just get rid of a little more pigment than, say, just the makeup sponge. It's a little tougher. Now this will be less of a glaze, and I'm pretty much just painting that in. Not really going to wipe much of that away. Maybe just a tiny bit like that. That's it. Just a couple of quick strokes, and I'll leave that as it is. Got to do the other leg. And then we got to get to this base and our movement tray. So that's one of the reasons why there's an awful lot of color out on the palette. Probably more than most folks are used to. And this is not a wet palette, by the way, in case anyone's asking. You can see there's plenty of liquid in there anyway. Don't really need something to put more liquid out there. So we'll take away, again, some of the leftover stuff, and now we're going to get into the ground here. It just, for the most part, needs to be darker shades of grays and browns, because I'm going to put a lot of snow on this. Here now we'll get into some of our brown liner. Get a little liquid on there, let it help it to flow a little more. Back to our red and green. Get that right up to where the foot is. And there you go. So for those of you that already know, well, you already know. But for those that maybe are new to this, I've got my series on the Lannister halberd unit. There's 5 episodes. Started with the basing, so you learn how to do basing like this. Basing the entire unit, all 12, and actually the guard captain too, because you need those attachments. So see, we're just wiping away some of that. There we go. We're taking advantage again of all that primer painting that we did earlier. So I'll leave him aside, and now it's time to get really, really messy here. Yeah. This is our base, and if you're wondering, that's a branch. Yeah, that's just a piece of twig. Because when you think about it, nothing does nature better than nature. You just can't beat that. So we're just gonna go in here with our watered down brown liner here. Let's throw a little bit of the sepia in there too. That's good. And well, there's really not. The only reason I'd magnetize this is for transport. Wouldn't need to magnetize it like I magnetize the units, like those shiny Lannisters we were talking about. And I did the sky earth non-metallic metal technique on them. I'm going to have basically my whole army that way. I'm going to do the unit of the Lannister Knights. I've got one already. That's already up on the blog. But there's 3 more to do to finish out that unit. So I thought I'd do that kind of in a unit painting style also. Those are the type of videos that'll be available for the patrons. Gonna go back in with our sponge here. We'll just take away some of this paint, and when the sponge just gets too full of paint / liquid, take your scissors, cut that away. You got some fresh sponge, and it's also in a different shape. See, it's starting to take more off. But the nice thing about this, you're getting all these different colors. You can see some of the sepia in there, a little bit of the green, a little bit of the red. Instead of having to paint all that in, it just happened a little more on its own, a little more random. And there's a lot more randomness to nature. We as humans tend to impose an awful lot of rules and regulations on nature and try to organize it. So yeah, this little stick here is just some dried foliage. I put this on here because I want to have some snow and icicles coming off of that. There we go. That pretty much finishes up our movement tray on this. I'm just going to take some more of that brown liner here. Now what I would normally do is be working on a couple of these guys at once, maybe some other things too. But I'm trying to do this as a tutorial for you here and show you what's involved in painting up your upcoming savage giants. So we'll leave that to dry a bit. Now you go back to him and you can see how we've really enhanced some of the shading on him. I can see my greens over here. I can see that some of the grayish purple skin tones. And what the heck? Let's throw out a few lighter colors. We'll see what happens. So remember the Sacred Weapon. This is the verdigris green. That's kind of a mid-tone. But also going to throw this out there. Verdigris pale green. This is stuff that'll go also into the skin tone. I know that sounds crazy. Why are you putting that bright green out there for skin tone? But first, so you're going to take our brush here, a little bit of that brown liner in there. Get this where you can see it. And now we'll start to do a little bit of what you might say regular painting. Here, let's lighten that up a little bit. At this stage, we can even do a little bit of wet blending. But you see, I'm not losing what I did in the shadow areas. I'm working with that instead of covering that up. Here. Got this bit down here. But we're going to switch that up a touch here. Like this. Yeah, adding a little bit of the sepia liner. Starting to make this a little more yellow, and the idea is that this, it'll contrast more with the skin tones, sort of by default, because it's not going to be, won't be lighter. But if the skin tones are more of a reddish purple, and you've got more of a warm yellow green here, you'll get a little bit of contrast, kind of by default. It's contrast without a whole bunch of work. That's always a good thing. Making a little less work for yourself. You can see how we're just mixing along. I don't want to get stuck in one area here, so let's move around. And I'm going to carry some of that green into other areas too, not just in that one spot. Might even throw a little bit onto this. I'm not sure if it's a bone or a log that he's carrying. In some ways it's hollow here. I thought it was maybe a bone, but I don't know if these are supposed to be tendons off the back here. Here, I'm going to throw a little bit of this green into the skin tone. I'm going to back this out just a touch. Like that. And then just leave it alone. Leave it be. Guess what? I'm going to take some of that green, throw it on the rocks here. Man, I can also, here, let's throw out some other stuff here. Let's get the maiden flesh over here. Let's get one of our other colors in here. That's that rust type color. So that's going to make it still on the greenish side, but it's a whole different tone of green. And we're going to go right here. Again, looking to not only lighten that up, but also shift the color. So we'll mix that skin color with a little bit of the sepia liner here. And we've got these tusks right here. They're either tusks or bone, one or the other. Not really sure. I'm going to use it on his whatever he's carrying around as a weapon. And let's lighten this up just a touch. Here, let's take some of this maiden flesh. We can mix that with that green. And you say, well, this doesn't look too much like a base coat, but it really kind of is. Because all we're doing is just figuring out what we want color-wise in certain places. Where do we want the lights and darks? I wasn't sure. Did I want greens over here? Once I started to see the purplish type colors up there, then I knew, yeah, I think I want that green. I think I'm going to want that green over there. So now a little bit of the sepia liner to warm that up. Because we established a bunch of shadows, and then we could get in here and start to play with these lighter areas, the midtones. Remember that filbert brush I was telling you about? See, I spread that out. Look at that. Just completely changed the size and shape of that brush in no time at all. And this is definitely not a dry brush. You can see there's plenty of liquid on this brush, plenty of paint. But it lets me just scumble on a few of these lighter layers here. Let's get a little more of that skin type color in there. And we know that these have to be a touch lighter. And all we're trying to do is figure out what it is some of this stuff is. See how we're already starting to get some contrast in there. The other reason I bring up the shaded base coat stuff is that when it comes to painting an army, I don't know if there's any of us in the world that can just get enough time to sit down and in one sitting just do the whole thing. That just is never going to happen. Sometimes you get to paint a little bit of it and then hopefully maybe play a game or two with it. That's the nifty thing about this shaded base coat stuff, because not too long from now you'd have something that you could at least throw out on the table just to have it out there. And at least it would look like something. Certainly be better than just an unpainted or just a primed miniature. And then after you're done playing your game, and next time you get to paint some miniatures, you can refine it a little more. You can tackle what we'll be doing in the next stage. So let's not get too involved with that. Let's get some of, we have some of the, we'll just use some of this. So we're going to make some grayish skin tone here. That's that red rust type color. It's got a little green in there to gray that down. And see, that's not all that different than the color that was already there. So I'm basically using as a guide. So now we're just playing off of what was there and what our glazes created on top of that, on top of our primer painting, as I like to call it. Again, done with Badger Stino Res primers. I think I used the green. I used the reddish brown color. I think the last couple of layers were the sandy yellow and even a touch of white. Let's make sure that you can see that. We're going to throw a few highlights on here. Let's start working the top of the head a little bit. But when you look at their faces, see that guy on the lower left corner of the lower left image? He's got a lot of green on his face, so we want to impart some of that here too. Now I don't want this hand to get too much lighter, because otherwise we won't have any contrast with our branch here. Again, plenty of paint on the brush. Can always go back in here, do some more glazes over the top. Get this other hand. When you're working on your miniatures and you use bigger brushes like this, and I use these on small ones too. If you've seen any of the other videos, and even just look at my YouTube channel, don't have to only have the Patreon videos. You'll see I use these brushes all the time. It helps to speed things up because, well, I'm working bigger, faster, covering more space with each brush stroke. But I'm also not destroying. I have sable brushes, but they've lasted a whole lot longer than if I tried screwing around doing this with those sable brushes. So this rock that he's walking on there, that's part of the figure itself. Again, for those of you not familiar with these, they're not necessarily one-piece figures, but they've been assembled for you. And they are pretty unbreakable, that's for sure. Remember trying to get the flayed men out of the box, and I dropped every single one of them. They bounced across the floor, picked them up, put them in the box, and they were fine. Now if they're painted, hopefully they would be sealed really well, and they would also be, there we go, have a lot of layers of primer on them. That's the other reason I like to use the Badger Steino Res, because it covers everything: metal, plastic, all kinds of plastic, bones plastic, this kind of plastic, you name it, covers it all. So before we get too far with this, let's see what we've got going on with the base here. Oh, we've got some of these lighter colors. Let's see how that tree branch just kind of absorbed all those colors real nice. You know, people are always saying, oh, but they're not going to last. They've just doomsday predictions, this, that, and the other. I've had them on my bases for years. Play with them all the time. Absolutely nothing's ever happened to them. So I know folks sometimes they just get influenced by some of the fear peddling that goes on, and there's really no point in that. Not sure why people insist on things. As you can see, I've got plenty of paint here, but I'm just using the side of the brush. But it's certainly getting the job done in a timely fashion here. Let's get a little more of this green. This is that verdigris green. Here we go. It's almost like it's a little bit of moss. We don't want everything, trees are brown, rocks are gray. Well, sort of, kinda, not really. It's the more variations you get, the more nifty things are going to look. Because if you really look at rocks, they're just pretty much every other color besides gray. Let's go back to our Savage Giant here, and let's throw out a little more of our Our secret weapon here. A couple of these colors out on the palette. What we're going to do is let this set for a bit. And we still have some of the initial glazes that are still wet in some places. So here we're, see how that has a little more rosiness to it. We're just starting to work in a little more variation here now. Because he's a big guy. You can't just have it all be a bunch of gray. It's going to get real boring real fast. What we'll do is we'll start working in that area that we call the mid-tones. I'm really starting to play with that now. And I like to keep these segments in the area of between 30 and 35 minutes. Just better for editing. So if you wonder why, it has nothing to do with painting. But see, look at that. Now we got a little bit of transition to our skin tones there. But we've got ourselves a nice base to work from. Nice introduction to our giant here. Alright, so what we'll do is we'll set up for our next segment where we get in more in the mid-tones, work on the skin, do some stuff on the cloth, and then he'll start looking more and more like the big bad beastie that he is. Let's get into those middle tones that we were talking about. Middle tone, that sounds like this fancy art term. There's nothing really fancy about it. It's just halfway between light and dark, or somewhere in that area. Now remember, I told you we were working in that purplish gray. Well, see, we mixed the green and that skin tone together, and now we get kind of a purplish skin color here. And you'll see me start to work with a little more careful brush strokes, I guess, if you want to call them that. Maybe just not quite at the warp speed that I've been going. You know, as we switch to a brush here that has more of a pristine tip on it. A little better condition there. And let's get some more of this on the hand. And what's interesting is this starts to look so light. But if you had something to compare it against that's actually light, you'd realize just how dark this is. So let's get something that is white. There we go. So there's something that's white. It's even invisible. Look at that. So look at how dark. That's how dark the color is that we're working with. But yet on the miniature itself, it looks like we're adding a light color. Let's get into some of his unmanscaped body here, just a touch. I guess that's why they don't need a fur coat. They sort of carry their own with them wherever they go. And now if we want to make that a little lighter, I can add some of the maiden flesh. It's really just an off-white. I don't think of it as a skin tone. I use maiden flesh to just lighten everything. I'll use it on when I'm painting the exposed wood on trees, you name it. It's not just limited to working on skin tone. And the nice thing is, see, I can basically lay the brush on its side. I'm still using my finger here. So I can get rid of some of that excess paint. The nice thing about the Secret Weapon weathering paints is that they are designed to be used transparently. Or at least in a more liquid fashion. And like I said, I'm going to keep going far beyond what we're doing here. It's all about just refining along the way. You establish what you wanted to get color-wise, and then here I can even, if I wanted to later on, I can practically paint in what looks like stubble there. There's all kinds of stuff I can do later on. But for the time being, we don't want to get bogged down. And I know the folks that have seen these type of videos before or watched me paint in person or been in one of my live classes, they know the reason I don't let myself get bogged down in one area. Same reason why I don't really use black primer or white primer exclusively, because I need to see what's around it. Can you imagine if this was all black primer? Everything that I'm painting on this skin would look light. Absolutely everything. And then when I cover up the black primer, all of a sudden all the stuff that I thought was way too light is now way too dark. Way too dark. Because I had no context. See here what I'm doing? Just it's almost like we're back at the beginning again. So I'm taking away paint. This is what my hands always look like after a day of painting. The glove on this hand is less about keeping my hand clean, because, well, it doesn't necessarily do that. It's more about the camera. I found out the hard way. Skin is pretty darn reflective. In some ways, it's a little bit like his, now that it's getting lighter. And it really makes the camera go bonkers. Found if I have a blue glove, that doesn't happen. It's almost like a green screen. See, now I can pick a few of these ropes here, maybe, to lighten. I'm going to get some of that engine rust back out here, like so. Some of my verdigris, dark green, like so. And see, I've got kind of a warm green there. I think you can still see some of my original green in some of these areas. So I even cranking a little more in some places, but what I really wanted to get to was this. So you think, what in the world are you using a skin color, which is actually a rust, to lighten green? Yep, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. And what that does, keeps it a little more muted, because he's not an elf. He doesn't need bright green. Whatever these are, or maybe it's some poor guy's tent or something like that he ripped up, and it's what's left of some Stark commander's tent or personal tent or something like that. And he's just walking around with it. I mean, that's why there's all these ropes on it. I don't know, maybe I could almost have him wearing some flags or whatever and almost paint it like it's pieces of banners that have been just kind of sewn together or lashed together somehow. That might be fun. And I'm going to get some of the maiden flesh back out over here. And this is going to be a much different green. Good, still on the palette. Wasn't sure if it was. Here, let's make that not so light. We don't want to do highlights yet. But we now have a little different shade of green. And just gonna work that in right there. Now get rid of some of the excess. And the point is not to make these green, which means, let's throw some of this out here. This is the yellow rust. Meant to put it out before, just kind of forgot about it. Just having too much fun with other things. See, now we got a different type of green, something that's a little more yellowish. And that's gonna go here. Leggings. Now originally I was gonna have a lot of mud spatter on this. I might still do that. Kind of a combination of mud spatter and snow. I may do some blood effects on his weapon there. We'll see. Sometimes you have a little bit of a general outline for maybe what you want to do with a certain figure, and you realize, wow, maybe that would be too much. Sometimes more is less. You'll get a little bit of that yellow in here. Let's get a little, just, again, not a dry brush. I just wanted to make sure that color finds its way everywhere and not just in one spot alone. So back to the maiden flesh. You can see this is why I referred to it as an off-white instead of a skin color. So we're still, again, avoiding super uber highlights at this point. I know the folks that are used to listening to me, they're very familiar with me saying, hold those really bright highlights. I don't want to see white on your palette until the very, very end. There's another reason for that. You have to figure, alright, so he's going to have all this snow on the base, maybe some snow on his shoulders here, and if the skin and all those other colors are really, really bright, it's going to present an issue because your snow might actually look gray by comparison because you've lightened up the skin tone so much. Way too much. Yeah, then your snow not going to look quite so pearly white. It's going to look more dingy gray. So that's the other reason to make sure that those skin colors don't get too bright. The easiest way to do that is just avoid the temptation. Just don't have white out there. There's other colors you can use to pretty much do the same thing. So let's use this. Lighten up that reddish color. That's another thing that I try and talk about all the time. You're trying to lighten up a red. You don't want to reach for white. Because what's that going to do? It's going to make it pink. It's going to make it chalky. There's a lot of people, they tell me that whenever they try and lighten their reds, it just turns chalky. And that's what I've done here because I want this to have a little bit of a reddish tint to it. That's why I've used that yellow-orange. Here's some of that rust color. And again, you can see how we're starting to get a little more gentle with the brush strokes, a little less frenzied. So let's do something down here. I don't really want that color of green. See, we're going to make this even a more grayish green. That's that green liner. That's really going to make it cooler and more gray. We're going to go... Ah, good. Looks like you can see that. And as dark as that was on the palette, look at how light it seems here. Again, it's all about context. Because what we've got here already is so dark. Anything we put on there seems light. And by the way, the shadow, we use that brown liner. Now we're putting a little bit of green over the top, but we're letting that brown liner shadow come through a little bit. Another reason for the... Here, if I tilt it that way now, I think you can see it. Another reason for this cooler green, as I call it down here. Now, there's going to be snow on the base. Probably going to want to at least try to reflect some of that. Reflected light is always important. Which is why we're going to have some here on this stick slash bone, whatever he's carrying. Yeah, it might be fun to actually have some blood spatters on the end of that. And then maybe getting into the snow too. Because hey, why not? And here, let's a little more with the maiden flesh. We'll get some of that color here too on his very hairy arms. A little bit onto this cloth over here. Now I do try to show as much as I can. Try to show every last thing, every brush stroke. Because if I go off camera and do stuff and just say, well, magically, poof, look at this. Here it is. That's not super helpful. Especially as a tutorial. There may be things where there's no way for me to get it on camera or fit it on screen. So if you don't see something, that would be the reason why. Alright, let's drop a few shots of yellow in there. Yeah, and this is the way you can keep something that's as big as this, that in many ways has some pretty limited colors to him. It's one way to keep that looking interesting. Because something like this, you know, lots of fun shapes and everything, but boy, you can kill that in a hurry when you just dry brush something in there and dip it in brown varnish or something like that. There's just a lot of subtleties you won't get when you do that. Just like here, even in the skin tone. Even on his hairy arms. See, we're starting to layer these a little bit. And by layer, I don't mean layers of color. It's layers of, well, layers of hair. Because I've cut enough hair for folks over time to hear that expression of layering. So let's get a little more of a light there. The other thing that I talk about a lot is always trying to keep in mind, where am I putting highlights? highlights up here make a lot of sense. Highlights down here on the bottom of his foot make less sense because it's just farther away from where the light source would be. So that's something else I try to keep in mind. Let's throw this back out here. Doesn't really... I think the eyes are just kind of regular. I don't want to call them human eyes, but they're just kind of regular looking. So let's put something in these eyes here. Just something to indicate they're there. So like that. And this is something that we would actually, well, obviously red, something that we would use for some of those blood effects. I'm going to throw that out here now, especially since we've got, we're working in our mid-tones, and this is usually something I like to incorporate in the mid-tones. So see how rosy that is. Well, let's give him the old rosy nose. A little bit of rosiness on the cheeks there. To see how that's a little bit lighter. And get some on the chest too. Usually the rosiness has to do with capillary blood vessels there that are right near the surface, and especially in the cold or whatever, you're trying to get more blood flow there, so they sort of turn more rosy. And you can see this is really not a light red at all. It's had to change the focus on this to make it work and get him on the screen. So sometimes I'm gonna end up having him too close or whatever, or too far out of focus, because I film a lot of videos. This is already the second one I've done today, and I'll be doing one more after this at least. So sometimes I get used to holding the miniature a certain way. We're going to do this on the hand. It's another thing I like to do on hands. Because unfortunately I've noticed it on myself when, even if I'm wearing gloves sometimes, I just look at my hand and geez, all of a sudden it looks pink. So I'm going to turn down the brightness here a bit. That's better. So now the skin tone's not getting as washed out as it was. There, I'm going to throw a little more. A little more on his hand here. Remember, I can always, if I feel it's too much, I can always tone that right back down. No problems. Let's not forget some of our greens. And that's going to be here on the top of his head. Almost like a sort of a 5 o'clock shadow type thing here. I'm just going to take my finger and work that in. And now, what do I have over here? So you have a little contrast of red and green. The rosiness on the cheeks, but now that greenish look over here. Obviously, hair, whatever, that's going to be more grayish. So it's not just a darker shadow color, but now we get some differential here from this side of the face to this side. Let's try some of that over here too. Notice that I have not ditched the bigger brush yet. Doing that on purpose. Because if I get away from the bigger brush, I'll start to hang around in one area just too long. Don't want to do that. And let's say we go, okay, that's too light. We need some dark in there. So we're gonna go in, we're gonna find our brown liner around here somewhere. Now, actually, I'll just throw some red liner back and mix it in with the green, like we did back in the beginning. Alright, I think I got it where you can see it, and I'm gonna darken that down. So I can wipe away some of it, but that just got too light. I can take away a little bit over here. Some of these areas just got a little too light. I think a lot of times, well, people ask me less now than they used to, but about the different mediums, the drying this and the retarder that and the flow improver, and used to use those back in the day. I still have them. It's not that I don't like them. I just don't really think to use them. I guess I'm doing just too many figures all at the same time. And I've got plenty of water. So I think it's just kind of out of sight, out of mind. That would be the only reason why I don't mess around more with the flow improver. I used to like that. That was pretty neat. I don't need things to extend drying time or whatever. I wanted to do that. That's what oils are for. And people say, so what do I use to make oils dry faster? I say I use acrylics. And if I want acrylics to dry slower, I use oils. It's as simple as that. And this is, again, more of a pinkish type color here. Gives me a little differential from the skin to the hairiness. So what we'll do next maybe is, maybe we will break out a slightly smaller brush here. Maybe we'll get down to some refinement. But you see how the hair now has a little more light to dark shape to it. It's looking a little lifeless there. Didn't have much in the way of shading, and don't necessarily want it to be as dark as the guys on the lower left. But I didn't want it to just have no shape whatsoever. Here, let's get a little more of this green going here. And the idea is it looks like almost like that 5 o'clock shadow we were talking about. There's some of that red liner. Mix it with the green. I think some people are convinced I think there was a character from that book 1984, and his job was to basically take words out of the dictionary. He was trying to remove those words from use. I think people are convinced I'm trying to do that with colors. It's just take more and more of those out of circulation by just mixing. I think people, they make mixing sound way tougher and way more scary than it actually is. It's really not. You don't really need sophisticated computer software or color wheels. You just have to think a little bit. It's like a chess match. You can see we have another thing here where we got some of the rosiness on those knuckles next to something that's more of a green here on the stick/bone, whatever the heck that is. Alright, that's pretty good. So what we're going to do is, again, kind of go to a smaller brush, and now we're going to start to add a little more refinement to this. Maybe paint some eyes on him here. Do some more reflected lights here on his clothes, if you want to call them that, his rags. So we'll be back with some more details in a jiffy. We're going to keep working on our giant here, and as promised, we're going to add some lighter tones. Have a little bit smaller brush that we're working with, and you'll see a big difference. It will not take long before. Here, let's get a little more of the old rust out here. And I love using the rust colors for skin colors. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it really works. Yeah, make sure a little touch of that green in there. Making sure this is where you can see it. And now we start to get some lighter colors in here. It's going to start to separate the beard too a little bit. You can see that I'm in some ways scumbling these brush strokes on there. Instead of, you notice that I just didn't layer, okay, there's a lighter skin tone, and then a lighter skin tone, and then a lighter skin tone, and we just endlessly keep layering those up. We used to do that back in the day. You get some nice shading. That way it would certainly go from light to, or dark to light, no biggie. But it just didn't have much zing to it. It just looked pretty dead. And when I look at old miniatures that I painted way back in the day, I see shading that, shading is nice and everything, plenty of light and dark, but it just doesn't have much depth to it. And that's what you can do when you're not just mixing your own colors, but creating your own depth this way. So here we're going to mix a little green into that, just like I was talking about. We want variety here. So let's put some of this here. I'm going to move it around, take some of it away. In my shaded base coat class that I do, there is a certain point where the brushes are taken away completely, and you just have to paint with your fingers. It actually becomes a favorite portion of the class. So now I'm taking a little bit of that red, the old rust, mixing that in. And to just show you how much further I can go, because none of this is a highlight at all. See, I can keep going lighter here. And now this starts to recede that much more. But we haven't lost some of the rosy color that we had. We haven't lost that grayish purple. And I know folks that, again, have seen me doing this before. They know that one of my favorite ways to make gray is to take purple and green, mix those together. And it really does make sense, because remember earlier we said that red and green make brown. Well, what's in purple? You have red and blue. And then when you add in the green, you've essentially brought in the brown. Blue and brown make black. When you lighten up black, what do you get? You get gray. So there you have it. Now for the hair here of his beard. So I think when I get down to the most detailed stuff, like the eyes and such and his beard. I may alter my focus here on the camera, bring it in a little bit because it's kind of farther away right now. But you see here as I pick out a few lights on the beard, all of a sudden that starts to come out. Remember we had knocked it down with the darks and it looked like it had just kind of gone away completely, and oh look, now it's starting to come back. See, we're not going to highlight every part of the hair equally, just some parts of it. Here, let's get back with that green. Come on, there we go. And I do think I want to have some snow piled up on his shoulders. I think that would be fun. So I need to make sure I save time for the snow effects. And see, now we're starting to pick out some more of these individual hairs. And underneath the original tones, whatever you want to call those, that was the red and green mixed together. So there's a lot of red in some of these shadows. So here I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna change our focus a bit. Yeah, gonna get that a little bit closer here. And like that. So now you'll be able to see, I think, what we're doing a little bit better. So again, it's taking that greenish color and we're essentially using that to play off of our original reddish shadow tones. I have a bunch of, I call them color theory episodes available for the patrons. I know I did originally 5 of those. There was greens, blues, reds, yellows, and even gray. I just did another one that focused more on magenta. Got ones that have object source lighting. So pretty much every technique, every basing technique that I use, color, whatever it is, I've got something for you there. Now on this side, not necessarily going to continue with the green. This is going to be more like the skin color here. See, I'm just picking out a few of these. Not making each one identical. And if something just gets too bright, well, we can knock that right back down again. So I'm going to take some of that red, some of the green, and we'll just knock that down a bit. And let's see if, good, some of that yellow is still okay. I want to do a few things here just to get a little separation on that. Now we can think about getting a little lighter here on the ivory of our tusks, because I'm fairly certain, and just a little, I was looking for reference pictures and I saw a whole bunch of mammoths partying with these guys, so I assume these are mammoth tusks that he's got, that he's sporting here. And there's a little stitching here. We're going to bring some of that out. But again, I just wanted to wait on stuff like this. Here, let's bring out a few things on his leggings here. Some of the twine, sinew, whatever he's using to keep these together. And let's get some right here on there's just a few somewhat lighter tones there. And then let's move that around a couple other places. Let's put on the beard. Whatever these beads are that he's sporting. Get a little bit on the hair back here. Maybe even a little bit on this part of the cloth. I think you could see, just in general, it was less about working, say, dark to light, or even light to dark, than it was you start in the middle and you work your way out from there. Let's get a little of this in here too. Okay, what are we doing? Make sure you can see what's happening here. I think we got some more teeth over here, definitely, of some kind, so we're going to lighten those up a touch. I'll throw a little lighter highlight there. I'm also going to take, here we got the verdigris pale green, a little bit of that maiden flash. Hopefully that's still on the palette for you. Yeah, a little bit of a highlight here. And like so. There's some, I don't know if they're tears in the cloth or whatever. That's something we'll go back in and do with some darker color. But right now we're going to take some of that green, a little bit of the yellow. Where are we at here? I need a little bit of mid-tone in there. Here, let's get some on his cloth there. Now, I'm going to go back into the engine rust slash flesh tone color. And a little right there. Gonna try and get a few little highlights in on the little straps holding the tusks in place. And I'm gonna see if I'm gonna use some blue liner here. Because, why not? Because I can. And let's do some kind of eyes here. So again, I'm trying to attach those to that upper eyelid. And he's just kind of got that sort of a sad, forlorn look to his face, not sure why. We gotta make sure we have a second one that matches that. Sorry, I gotta turn this where I can see it. And then you try and make those. Yep, you're like, yo, what's up? I want some Funyuns. You got Funyuns? I haven't had those in a long time. Maybe that's why he's attacking the wall. He's just in search of Funyuns. That's all he wants. But nobody will give him Funyuns. Yeah, that's what happens while I'm painting. So what I wanted to do also with my blue liner is start to get some blues. See if you can, it's going to be tough for you to see it, but this is in that area again where I want the snow. They have some influence. I'm putting a little bit of that bluish color here, and now we're going to lighten that up. It's just a little bit of the maiden flesh there. It's kind of a grayish blue. Let's see. Now, I know most people think, well, that's what you do with metals, but see, just even a little bit here, like that. On these surfaces, will give a reason for your snow to be nice and bright and happy. So we're going to put some of that here. So that's practically a bluish color. We're going to put some of that here. And look at that, it turns around and now we got yellow. And I say, Jim, what the heck? Why are you putting blue and yellow all next to each other? Well, they're opposites. Okay, can you even see? I think you can see how we lighten those fingers / knuckles a bit. We're putting that same bluish gray over here. So these are the modifications sometimes that I will make. Sometimes I just call them mid-flight corrections. It's kind of like Waze. It's recalculating. And I'm going to get some over here too. So it's not just trying to get lighter colors in there, but colors that make some kind of sense. I know it may seem pretty random. I'm just taking these weird random colors, putting next to each other. It's really not the case. It makes sense for this to be a bluish gray, because guess what's going to be right down there on that base? A big old blob of snow. So it stands to reason that it would be casting some light back up onto the figure itself. And I've seen it happen, even just here in the city, just, on street level, but I'm sure it happens in a more natural environment too. But I still leave the reddish shadow color behind, not losing that, and we're also still using the maiden flesh to lighten this, so it keeps just a touch of warm on that also. So see, now we have a little more shading depth, but also more color depth. And we should also get some of this on the hair and fur, I think. Most definitely. I mean, you can see, I think even on that reference in the upper right hand corner, certainly some of it there. Let's knock this down a touch. Where are we at here? Alright. Because we had a lot of our original dark in there. We actually had too much of the original dark in there. I had to lighten it. Here, Let's get some maiden flesh and that together. Just like we did on the clothes and parts of the body there. Getting a little more of that blue. We're going to do it here on the underside of this, but boy, oh boy, even that's almost straight up blue liner, and I've got so much dark here that it looks like a highlight. It is not. It's not even a mid-tone. It's not even a dark mid-tone. So we were definitely adept at working those darks in, no doubt about that. And I think we'll try and see if we can't work some of this into that skin tone. Let's see right here. Remember, we want to make sure we have some gray there. Let's go here with a bit of that. And here. It really is actually a dark color, so all it's going to do is just put a little more shape in those shadows. And this is the nifty part where things are reasonably under control, it would seem. And now you're just gonna looking through, making some alterations here and there. I see this actually has to be skin tone in here. I tried not to study these figures in advance so that things would be a little more spontaneous, where you wouldn't say, okay, here we're going to paint this thing for the 5th time or the 15th time, and we know exactly how everything's going to turn out. No, I wanted it to be a little more spontaneous / dangerous than that. Because it seems to, in a way, bring the experience closer to what yours is going to be. You're not necessarily planning out every little detail, and you're certainly not painting the same figure lots and lots and lots of times. So I'm going to get some of that red back out again here. Yes, the dreaded dropper bottles. I always keep one of these push pins handy, and that seems to do the trick. And I'm going to try and get back in some of the rosier colors in places. Along here. Along here. Some on the hands. Some here on the skin in a few places. Kind of focusing where there might be some kind of a vein or blood vessel that's kind of protruding through. And I'm going to put some of my, see if I can sneak a little bit of that yellow rust back out there. Like so. And let's get ourselves a few, find something in here of a little brighter accent of yellowish color here. Let's get that in focus. And whatever those beads are in his beard. And try and get a few lights right here. Maybe even a bit of a highlight there. On his fancy war club here. And maybe a few things on the sinews twine here. Alright. Just a couple, not every last thread, just a few. Remember, sometimes more is less. Still got our maiden flesh out here. And I'm gonna just try and work in a few light colors here on the skin. And what the heck now? We are in the late stages of this, so if we get out the white and start doing a few things, then we can really see just how much brighter some of the highlights can be. Like here on the ivory. Like so. Even a few places maybe on the club. Back to the skin here. So it's mixed with a little bit of the, whatchamacallit, some of the rust color there. Let's get some on the brows here. We can make those a little more pronounced, give them a little more of an expression. There's just too much on there. We take some of that away. Gonna get a little more light on the tops of the cheeks there. And I think there's a little green left here. Let's see what else we can bring out. See this tusk over here? I'm gonna knock away some of that. I'll just get a little bit of a scumble in a little lighter color right there, and that's it. Let's go back. Again, some of that white there. Let's find some places for maybe the twine to get a few little highlights. Let's do that on this side. Again, these big old teeth here. We add some yellow to that. I guess there's some more twine / rope over here. So hopefully this shows you how to get a lot of the more muted colors, but just get way more variety. So we've got, let's see, we got a smaller brush here. Let's see what we can do with the eyes. All right. See if we can't put a little bit of a reflection in there. Like that. So it just gives the eye a little more depth to it. And I think we still got a little bit of this left. Let's see what we're going to do with some of the here. Now we can bring some of that out. Some of the beard. And all the while, I knew I was going to be doing this, but I just had to save that. Save all that for the end. So what we'll do is go back to our base real quick maybe and do a few things on that. Here, let's try and get a few highlights on the knee here. Just a little bit. Maybe infuse a little bit of this red over here. A few other places. And you can do as much or as little of this as you want. It all depends. If you just need this to be a quick gaming thing, well, you sort of stop maybe after what we did with the initial shaded base coat, and then a little bit of mid-tone action. And it's all up to you. There's no, not trying to lay down a bunch of rules here for you. It's just some ideas, some guidelines, or framework basically, something that you can build off of, and you incorporate some of this into what you do. Maybe you incorporate none of it. Maybe all you do is it changes the way you think about your brushes a bit. Doesn't have to be all of it. Hopefully it's not none of it. What I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to grab the base and we'll try and finish that off a little bit too in our next segment, and then we'll try and get some snow on this guy and see what we can do there. Let's do some more stuff on our base here. Now, I guess you could call this is movement tray. So let's do that. I'm going to stick with the same colors we've had out there. There's the rust red. That's a little bit of the yellow rust. Mix those together. And we're not going to dry brush this so much as just scumble that on there. Again, it's another art term. Basically just means you're scrubbing it. onto the surface. It's not much, just a little bit here and there. And I've got several articles on the blog. This is, again, made out of tree bark, some cork, and I'll be doing more basing tutorials. They are also part of every army painting series. So episode 1 is always basing. And let's see if I can grab one over here for you. So I think we've got some Night's Watch here. Let's see if we can find one that's... here we go. So this is an upcoming... It's actually the next series we're working on. And what I'll be doing is showing how I made bases like this. So again, the same tree bark, same little dried foliage, just some rocks, the oxide paste. Something I've done on many other units and miniatures before, and I just really love it. I really, really like it. So I've grabbed a little bit of the... This is the rust, engine rust color, a little bit of the red rust, and I don't want to make this completely brown. Just want to give it a little less of a gray appearance because remember there's snow. It's going to go over the top of this. So I got to give the snow something to contrast with. It's still going to be really relatively dark. Here, I'll take some of that away. See, we're just still working around our base here. I'm going to set the brush on its side. Work some on this way. Most of that's, again, just going to be covered up by the snow. So I'm not really getting terribly anxious about it. And let's finish off our base here because we got plenty of dark on this. You have nothing that's a mid-tone or a light, and we're going to change that right now, even though the snow is going to go over the top of this. And like I said, in the next segment, I'll break out a few different types of things that I use for snow. It'll be primarily the secret weapon, crushed glass, but I also use some Vallejo products too. That was Army Painter. I think it was Series 2. Yeah, it was Series 2, and that was where I did, I think it was 4 or 5 different snow types there, just to see which one did I like the best. I think I tried about 5 different ones, and sure enough, the one I liked the best was the one that was a combination of all the different materials and methods. They'd have the sparkle, it still looked light. You'll hear me talking about this. The advantage of the crushed glass is that you can make snow that is not just fluffy white. You can almost make it like slush. Just stuff you can't usually do otherwise. Alright. And while I'm in here doing the base, if I see some things on here that could use a little more depth, or maybe tone something down, knock it down, can do that too. Now, let's see, let's get some of the maiden flesh back out here. We've got some of the, I think there's even still a little blue liner left, but yeah, mostly the verdigris green here. Let's get a little bit of light on some of these rocks. You're going to have a really tough time seeing that because it's basically hidden under the club. So these rocks were a combination of different things. Some were cork, like the one I'm painting here. This is actually bulletin board, cork. Some of the other rock sections, those are bits of tree bark. Here, let's get back to our movement tray here. And I'll just try a few areas here. A little bit lighter. And not necessarily putting that green on every last part. So once again, you see these are the tree bark rocks over here. And over here we've got, that's the bulletin board cork rock. Gonna get some shading on this guy here, our piece of tree. It's pretty inexpensive, just pick the stuff up off the ground. Alright, so let's call that ready to go. And next thing we're going to do is some of the ice and some of the snow effects here. Right? Yeah, I'll do that next. See how he fits on his base. There we go. It's all set for snow. So we'll be back with that in just a second. The last thing I wanted to try and do on our Savage Giant here is some snow effects. Now I've got a couple of other Song, Ice, and Fire figures like Great John here. And with this one, you can see we've got our crushed glass snow, and this is a bit more on the slushy side. The idea is that it's not that necessarily fresh powdery snow, but this is maybe snow that's been a little bit melted. It's not quite cold enough yet for snow to really pile up and stay there forever. Winter is coming. Now, remember I talked about icicle effects. Well, see right here where the brush is pointing. See here off of there, now you can see it. Gotta try and maybe do some of these icicles here off of the tree branch. That's right over here. So we'll see if we can do this too. Right? And we're gonna move some of these guys out of the way. Right here. And we'll show you some of the stuff we've got. So this is the Vallejo ground texture. Now this is pretty much just going to show up as white on the camera, I think. Well, I'll put it in shadow. There's a little bit of texture to that, but you see it's white. I mean, it's bright white, and that's pretty much all that it does. We also have the Woodland Scenics Snow Flock. But this is the interesting stuff here. So here we've got the secret weapon. This combination here of the crushed glass, and yes, it is crushed glass, and realistic water. A couple of things. Don't shake this. It says that right there. I know there's the temptation to shake every jar of liquid, but don't shake this. Sometimes we even write it in bigger letters. And this, you don't want to be getting this in eyes or in your hands. It's another reason why I've got the glove on for sure for doing this. It's also why I've got these little, so basically blister packs or clamshells, whatever term you want to use. So got these guys out here. They're handy little mixing trays that I can just throw away and not mess around with anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some of this snow material out here. And I usually like to throw it in some kind of a container. It's just a little milk container lid here. So we'll put this out. This is a combination of a few different techniques here. So I'll put that over there. Get this out of the way because it's kind of big and it'll just get knocked over. We also have the Liquitex Heavy Gel. That will be for our icicles. So as we do this, you can see this, the little crystals of glass. That's what gives this the sparkle, which is great, but you always have to keep in mind that it is dangerous stuff. You don't want to be blowing on it or anything like that. So what we're going to do is we'll just keep this over here, the realistic water. And this stuff will dry relatively quick. So we've got our crushed glass over here. And what we'll do is we get a little bit like so. Now this, when I mix this in, I can do the palette camera closer. Do you see how that's really liquidy, like the melted snow right there? So the more crushed glass we put in, it's almost like plaster. You know, you add more plaster and it starts to get, see how it starts to thicken? I'll add a little more. But the thicker it gets, you can see it starts to get puffier. It becomes a little more tricky to apply. And you can also dust this stuff over the top. So I'm going to go with what we've got here. I'm going to start to place some on our base. And you can see how it's got a little bit of liquidness to it, if that's a term. Here, let's get some here. Down here. Into the crevices like so. Around his foot. You can manipulate this stuff, but like I said, it doesn't stay wet and workable forever. It will dry on you eventually. And then it just gets kind of becomes sort of a solid mass, and that's an expensive solid mass, we'll put it that way. And you can tell already it's starting to get a little bit difficult to move around, manipulate. So we're just gonna use what we've got, and we're gonna stop here. And what we'll do is now pour a little bit of the crushed glass over the top. And sometimes it can be, there's one area I put a little more than I wanted to here, but that's really not too horrible. But what that's going to do is, see, I've got some almost melted type snow, and then here it's a little more solid. A little more crispy looking, like fresh fallen snow. Here, we'll do some more of that. And remember our powdery snow. What I'm going to do is just ever so slightly dust some of that over the top too. You got to do it fast. Really fast. Alright, so let's try this again. I'm going to put some more of the realistic water out there. And now I'll pour out some more of the crushed glass. And in goes crushed glass. Start to mix this up again. So I just found that this was easier to have the mixture a little bit more melty, watery, and then pour the stuff over the top than it was to have a much more dry mix. Just easier to manipulate. See how it starts to really get puffy there? We'll add a little more, and each time you add some of this, it's going to get more and more puffy. So we're just going to stop right here, like so. And we've got our movement tray. Just going to pop that out there. See, we're going to get some snow on our log here. Make sure to get some on our tree branch, otherwise there's no reason to have icicles coming off of it. Again, trying to make that look also on the puffy side. But that is the main reason why I like to use this, because it looks wetter, whereas the other stuff, it just looks like powder. So we gotta keep moving fast. Gotta keep moving fast, but I also have to be aware that this can't get down into my cylinder there where the figure's gonna go. Otherwise he's not gonna sit in there too well. So I will throw a little bit on that rock there. Here, I'll get some down in front of it. Now around it. Let's do a little more here. You can only do so much of this at a time, really. And don't want to run the risk of getting that out in the area where the figure is going to be. It's way more difficult doing this on camera than it is just doing it. I can say that for sure. Because to make it to where you can see what I'm doing makes it really difficult for me to keep track of where stuff is. So I'm going to have a little mound of snow there on that rock. And before this all dries, I'm going to try and pour a little bit on here. Oops, sorry about that. And then we'll do a little dusting of our other snow. Again, a little bit of that is going to go a very long way. Let's see how much of this we have left to work with. It looks like I'm going to just use it here on the base. I think we got a little more we can dig out of this. There we go. That's a little better. Yeah, when you can see how it kind of piles up in the brush there, it's going to do that. Sometimes you can pull a little bit of it out. Smush that back in there. And we're going to give it a little dusting of crystal. And a little bit of this. So that pretty much helps to take care of your base. Now if you get some where you don't necessarily want it, you can take a paper towel here. Maybe we can get rid of some of that. There, I might throw a little more right there. So we'll do one last, as much smaller amount here. And I want this on the figure itself. I have to be careful now. And this is something I say in some of the other videos that I do that involve snow. I've been walking to the grocery store just a couple blocks away, and if it's snowing, it doesn't have to snow that hard for me to be absolutely covered in snow. So what we're going to do, got his shoulders here. We're going to just place a little bit here on his shoulders. A little bit here on the arms. Tiny bit on the back. And now we'll just drop a little bit of our other snow on him here. And again, I'm not going to blow on this. Let's see how there's a little now dusting of snow on him, like our one reference picture. It's ever so slight, it's not that much, just a little bit. It's not like we don't want him to just look like he's standing still and not moving around, but a little bit of snow, not a bad thing. Looks like I have some that I can use here. Yeah, let's scrape some of this off the brush. There we go. We'll grab this. And that is going to go here. This is over the top of this. Build up on that. Looks like I need just a touch more here. So I'll throw out a little. Just takes a couple of drops. The crushed glass usually wins out over the realistic water. It takes way less crushed glass, or realistic water, sorry, than the crushed glass. So here we are. And you can fill this up as much as you want or as little as you want. We're just going to dump this on there. Come on. And do a little scatter of this. So it gives us a few. Snow is not always a universal texture. It's not always powdery. Sometimes it can be powdery, semi-melted, whatever. And we'll just call that good enough for now. Again, it'd be a lot easier for me to just do that off camera, but difficult as that is, I thought it might be interesting for you guys to see. Now I'm going to grab myself one more blister pack container here. I'm going to get rid of that brush, and we're going to use a different one. And let's see if we can do some icicles. This Liquitex Heavy Gel. It's something I use for a lot of different things. I've used it to sculpt fire, fur, you name it. You can see, look at that. It's already, it kind of looks like icicles just right there. This stuff does, as I found out, have a finite lifetime, so it's better to maybe get a smaller jar and use it more quickly than anything else. So I need me some fresh water here. and we'll kind of condition this. So this again, this side, when it's fresh out of the jar, you don't have to quite work it this much. But again, it's a little long in the tooth here. I've used this on a lot of projects. Let's keep going here. And the idea is, I think you saw how it looked right out of the container. We're just working this. Now, I know it looks pretty much just all white on screen. Now it's starting to... I'm also trying to let my snow effect set before I start messing around with it again. Doesn't take really long. At least set enough where you can touch it without destroying it. See how this is starting to get softer now? That's what we needed. Just needed it to get... This is more like what you see when it's a fresher out of the jar sort of thing. And it'll flow now a little bit better, or hang off of that branch a little more finely. There, we're almost there. See how we can build this up. All right. Now, it looks like it's on camera. So what we start to do is just build. Start to build up a little bit of the ice on here. So you need to get a little structure for it to hang off of. See how we've got this one? There we go. See how that one's starting to hang down. You can even employ a smaller brush here. And it takes, sometimes you have an icicle that forms perfectly right away, and sometimes it just takes more time. And these look like Elmer's glue, but you can see by the Night's Watch Scorpion crew there that eventually it does. Yeah, it turns perfectly clear. And sometimes you just get a really good pull like that. Oops, sorry. And if you give it just a minute or two to set up, sometimes you can get even more of a pull on it. We'll do a little more here. Maybe we'll just have a little bit of ice there. Let's have a little bit off of the end of this branch. There we go. Again, sometimes you have to get rid of what's on the brush. Sometimes you have to water it down. Here, let me get that. That's a better angle for you, I think. And sometimes you just do this. See it and pull down. There we go. It's a little bit like a yo-yo here. It'll spring back. But sometimes you just have to first provide the structure for it to hang off of. And then go from there. So I think we'll leave the blood effects to another one here. We've got plenty of stuff going on with this. And I've got blood effects on other videos. So yeah, we're going to be doing more of these guys. So we'll maybe try the blood effects there too. But yeah, the snow needs to set a little more before I can do the blood effects. So again, we can water this down. And then pull. Now if I had more time here, what you can do is let these dry and then do another layer over the top, and it essentially starts to look like, you know how icicles build up, it's dripping from the same place. Well, when you let these things dry and set up, and you really water it down, and then you add a little more to the end. Here, I'll try that again. Add a little more to the end. It starts to have that appearance of an icicle where it's been built up instead of just all in one and then pulled down. I think that gives you a nice full range of techniques and effects there. I'll be doing plenty of this on the Night's Watch 2 along with the Free Folk, because winter is definitely already there. Alright. So, our snow here, it will start out, it looks a little darker, it gets lighter as the liquid starts to evaporate there. Evaporate. And it starts to look more and more like the crystally snow that you like. Here's maybe a little more here. So it is already starting to set up, I can see. See if it'll let me build on it a little bit. I'll get rid of some of that. And then pull down on it. So there you go. So let's get our giant back out here. Check him out. Now he's got a little bit of dusting of snow on his shoulders, not too much. And some snow on his base. So we did a lot of stuff with flesh tones. Did some greens, some reds, some yellows. We varied the colors. Now, I mentioned Night's Watch, so this is another thing. You saw the ice part of it, but this is a scorpion crew. I've got another one of these. I'm going to make a video of how I did the basing on this. That's another video that's coming up. And let's see if I can get these guys out safely. Here's another upcoming video, and That's going to be our unit of Knights of Castlery Rock. We're doing all of it. We're doing Starks, Boltons, Lannisters. Everything's getting done. And another one that's available to the patrons. This is the Army Painter series that I did. And here is the Lannisters, the Halberds, the unit, all Sky Earth, non-metallic, with freehand and everything else. So that was all part of that 5-part series. And that is available for the patrons, the folks that are part of the Army Painter pledge level. And that's just $15 a month, and that will get you a whole bunch of content, usually about 20 some odd hours of videos every month. So thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed, you can subscribe. There's plenty of other tutorials on here. You can do the like thing. I think you know the drill. You've heard enough from other YouTubers. So I will catch you on the next Song of Ice and Fire video. Here, I'll put him in his base. See what he looks like. There you have it. Thanks again. Catch you on the next one.